All right, Classic FM 94.3, Abuja, the station that plays every song you know. It's 6 minutes before the top of the hour. You're in the Classic Lounge. My name is Faith. Great to have you join me today on the show. And I have been announced since yesterday that I'm going to be having a very special guest in the studio. And I'm really glad that she is here. And she's very early, so a huge welcome to the show, Ma. We have in the studio Dame Julie Okah-Donli. She's the Director General for the National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons. Welcome to the show, Ma.
Thank you.
I'm really glad to have you here because there's a lot to talk about. I mean, your agency has been at the forefront of a lot of things, trying to, especially when you're talking about the VAPP Act, fighting against sexual gender-based violence or the trafficking of persons. Your agency has been very active and been in the news. So we have quite a lot to talk about, today. I'm going to start with the issue of the trafficking of persons. I was reading a report where you were saying that according to your agency, at least 20,000 Nigerian girls were trafficked to Mali, forced into prostitution just last year. And this is something that has been a regular occurrence in several other countries as well. Whether we're looking at what happened in Lebanon, the lady that was being sold on Facebook. How do we deal with this? What's your agency doing to try to make sure we forestall this? Because I know that you're working, but if we can have like a clearer picture.
Yeah, thank you very much. You see, we need to carry out more sensitization, campaigns. Prevention is always key, when you're talking about any form of crime. And we also need the general public to know that prevention is not meant for the federal government alone. It's a fight that should involve the whole of society and the whole of government. So, of course, you also have a role to play. Everyone has a role to play when it comes to raising awareness. There's so much ignorance going on, and that's why you find people traveling out of the country because most of the time they are deceived by these fraudulent agents who give them the impression that they are going to be giving them jobs. There are no jobs out there. Stay in Nigeria and work. Because you know why it's a bit frustrating is because they pay so much money to even get on the plane and to travel to go to all of these countries. It's not like they even go for free. And unfortunately, by the time they get there, they are sold away for 2 years in the sense that the agents are the ones who collect the salaries for 2 years. So imagine going to a country and working for 2 years of your life without being paid anything because the agent has been paid up front. And the 2 years, the work is not even a small job. 18 hours every day. On top of it, you're sexually assaulted by the owners of the house and you're not given good food. You have to eat the remnants. You're told to sleep in the toilets or on the floor. It's worse than slavery, to say the least.
So this is what is constantly going on. So what it means is that some of the monies they even use for this trip can be invested to start a business or something in Nigeria, and will not be okay for it. But how come it is? Because trafficking of persons, we'll talk about a lot of the time about the women. There are also men being trafficked in this instance, right?
Absolutely, we have men, boys, children. Everyone is being trafficked. You see children on the streets; they are trafficked to beg. Someone is collecting the money. You see children on the street hawking, they are trafficked to hawk. Someone else is collecting the money. A lot of our Nigerian men are trafficked. In the sex industry, in the destination countries, they are forced to work as escorts. They are forced to work as pornographic, to work in the pornographic agencies. They are also forced to work on the farms. They are given very serious manual laborer jobs to do against their will, and there's nothing they can do because they find themselves in that vulnerable situation.
But what about, because there are agencies in different countries. I know about, the ambassador of Lebanon, speaking out on this and, saying that they're going to have a prevention of, people coming in for work because of these instances, happening. Are you working with agencies in different countries, liaising maybe with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and things like that to help try and curb this from that side as well, as much as we do here?
Yeah, we work with quite a lot of agencies in destination countries, but most importantly, we have an embassy in most of these countries, and they are the ones that are supposed to ensure that they carry out awareness campaigns to prevent people from being trafficked. They should have a special helpline so that when girls and boys find themselves in distress, they can reach out to assist them to either come back or to mediate, in whatever situation they find themselves in. So the embassies all over the cut across the world have a role to play as well. We work closely with most of them, but we need to re-strategize
to make sure that all of this are going on.
Absolutely.
What about when Nigerians are at the forefront of this abroad as well? Because there are some Nigerians who do these things.
Oh yes, we have Nigerians who aid and abet the other people in the destination countries as well. Only Nigerians cannot carry out any kind of trafficking business anywhere in the world. We have nationals of those countries as well working with the Nigerian nationals, because don't forget, when it comes to trafficking, those who are being trafficked are not for the pleasure of the Nigerian men or the Nigerian community.
True.
They are for the pleasure of those in the destination countries. And so we need to be seeing the destination countries arresting and prosecuting their citizens as well.
Let's talk about let's move into the issue of sexual gender-based violence, because that's a really hot topic going on right now in Nigeria, especially with the prevalent incidents of rape going on all over the country. I've been reading some of the things that you have been saying about the issue of rape, because you are the forefront of it. The issue of VAPP is actually domiciled. You are taking the reins on that. The issue of the Violence Against Persons, Prohibitions Act, it has not been domesticated across the country. There are states that have not domesticated this. And I had a senator in the studio last Friday, and he was saying, this VAPP Act, it was almost like he was feigning ignorance at the idea of it, even though he was a senator at the time that it was passed. So you have a few states that haven't domesticated, not a few, actually a lot of states haven't domesticated it. What is your move to try to get this to happen?
I think the federal government of Nigeria, under the able leadership of President Muhammadu Buhari, has taken the right step in the right direction by setting up a committee to look into all these gray areas. And I want to believe that the job of the committee will be to ensure that all the states domesticate the VAPP Act and the Child Rights Act, being that NAPTIP is already prosecuting cases of all forms of violence against persons in the FCT. Other states ought to, do the same thing. And I believe that that will send a very strong signal to all the governors to know that Mr. President means business, and it is very imperative that they set up, they domesticate the two very important acts.
I mean, see, the VAPP Act, I probably can see a little way into it, but the Child Right Act, I don't know how easy that would be, because I remember clearly, I mean, the senator had in the studio, he represents Kebbi Central, and he said northern Muslim states will never pass the Child Right Act, that we should not even talk about it, we should forget about it. It is a no-go area. It goes against the religion, it goes against the culture. It's not going to happen. And so when you have people who are very, very definite about the Child Right Act like this, that this is not going to happen, how is that going to be surmountable?
He was probably speaking for himself. Let's let the governors of all the states speak on behalf of the state. One man cannot come and speak on behalf of his state. So let's wait and see what the governors have to say. They keep talking, somebody talks about religion. I'm not sure there's anywhere that says that an underage girl should be married. I am yet to see that part. If they can show us, then we can say, okay. I'm yet to see that. But however, I'm not going to speak much on this, but I want to say that let's hear from the governors themselves so they can tell us why they do not want to protect the rights of the children in their states.
Does NAPTIP have branches or like agencies doing this in state governments, liaising with state governors and state assemblies?
We have 9 zonal commands cut across all the zones, and we try to have liaison officers in states where we do not have offices to act as a liaison between the state where we don't have an office and the zonal commander in the zones where we have offices. And we also have the headquarters here in Abuja, so that's how we work. And of course, we partner with all the relevant stakeholders, law enforcement agencies, NGOs, CSOs, and all of that.
Let's talk about here in Abuja, because I mean, what in Abuja it is much easier for you to do your job, because domestication of the VAPP Act and the Child Right Act is going on here. More than the other states. But let's talk about how easy it has been in Abuja, because we've had cases of, you know, women just being picked up and thrown in jail and say, oh, you're a prostitute and things like that. When you talk about sexual gender-based violence, those things, they happened here in Abuja, regardless of the VAPP Acts, you know, already being active.
Well, if we have cases reported to us where anyone was treated violently in any form or manner, we will take it up. Cases are reported to us. Some men throw out their wives, and we say, no, you cannot do that. I mean, you have a duty to protect your wife and your children. That's a violent act. And we've prosecuted quite a number of them. We've made arrests, you know. So if anyone has any problem, you know, of being treated violently in any form, they should report to NAPTIP, and we'll make sure we take it.
Does NAPTIP have a helpline?
Oh,
that
yes,
can be called.
We have many helplines, and of course, anyone can walk into NAPTIP office and even go to our website and report cases. You can report even on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Yes, you can report through any means on the social media, and we'll take it from there. You don't even need to come to my office to report a case.
So NAPTIP is very, very active on social media.
Absolutely, we are active. Yeah.
Let's talk about the sex offenders register. You know, because that seemed like a monumental, you know, growth, a monumental introduction into the dealing of this kind of crimes, you know, and it was very commendable from all sides about that. But there was also the worry that, what about, because of our non-extensive database right now, what about if somebody commits a crime somewhere and comes somewhere else, you know, does the sex offenders register carry photos and like a brief history of people?
Yeah, the sex offenders register has the photos and everything about the person captured in it. You see, this is where cooperation and sharing of information becomes very important and useful. If someone commits a crime, for example, in one of these other states, I expect the Nigerian police force to share information with NAPTIP, because we have a platform where we can easily, seamlessly share information between ourselves to update our records. I don't expect any other law enforcement agency to keep those data and say, oh, we have prosecuted 2 million people and all of that, and NAPTIP, who is in custody of the sex offenders register, is not even aware. You need to share information. We need to update our data at all times, and we need to ensure that everyone is captured in the sex offenders register.
What about states? I know Ekiti State was very big on the sex offenders register, as well as Lagos. Have you ever had other states come on board?
I know Ekiti and Lagos have been the key people that have really taken this thing, the bull by the horn, and are very serious about this. We will be sharing the data with them as well, because we need to have a comprehensive data, since the sex offenders register is like the national sex offenders register, so it has to capture offenses that have taken place all over Nigeria. So yes, I mean, they are doing a very good job, and I expect other states to do the same.
To come on board.
Yes.
I want to find out, because I think I've wondered about this for a minute. If we have the sex offenders register, what it means right now is like it's still optional. You can check it, you know, and then if you see it with your good mind, you can decide not to hire this person or have association with this person. So it's still just a shaming mechanism. Is there any plan, you know, to have some sort of legislation behind it, so that, you know what, if you're going to get a job, you fill the form to say if you have committed social crime and things like that, or to compel employers and people like that to check for people in the sex offenders register, so that it's not just an optional, oh, I'm going to check, oh, is this person there? Okay.
Well, it will only be people that are not serious that would have to wait for a legislation again that makes it imperative for them to know who they are hiring. You need to know who you're hiring, especially when you're hiring people that are going to work in very sensitive places. You don't need any legislation. There is a sex offenders register, and it is open to you on application for those who have been arrested for various kinds of sex offenses. And for those who were convicted, it is open to everyone, to the general public. So we expect serious-minded organizations to be coming to have a look at that sex offenders register, so they know who they are hiring in the first instance.
24 minutes past 1 p.m. is a Situation Lounge. I have in the studio Dame Julie Okah-Donli. She is a Director General for National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons. And we've been having an interesting conversation that you can definitely join in. That means that you can call or send messages to be a part of it, or just send WhatsApp messages to the number 0909 697 5943. You can tweet at Classic FM 943. And of course, the phone lines are open and available 0817 288 7943 or 0902 199 9943. So I was waiting, of course, until we had a lot of time to start to delve into the VAPP Act and, the fight against rape, which is where we are right now in this country. We have had an increase in the number of reported cases. I say reported because it's not like these things weren't going on before. It's just that now, thanks to social media, people are a bit more open to coming out to talk about it. We're talking about the Violence Against Persons Act before the break. That is one way to address this issue. There are people who probably don't even understand what that is about. Like, violence against persons, where does the issue of sex coming, and things like that. But it is something that your agency is at the forefront of pushing. So can we talk about the VAPP Act for a minute?
Well, the VAPP Act is the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, and this act provides for all forms of violence against boys and girls. I mean, before, when you talk about violence, people just think of women and girls, but it also includes boys and girls, and that means that violent rapes acts are considered as acts of rape. Female genital mutilation, inflicting injuries of any kind, bodily injuries of any kind, giving these marks on the bodies and all things like that.
Incisions.
All over the body and things like that, and of course beating and just harming, bodily harm. So that's basically what it is, and it is something that the federal government, using your agency, is trying to push to make sure it's domesticated all over to protect people. Staying on the issue of VAPP Act and sexual gender-based violence, like I said, we've had a huge reporting number of cases these days. You said something. I mean, I don't know if they coded it properly, so let's just be sure that you said it. There was a report that I saw about anyone who justifies rape should be arrested. Absolutely. And treated as a suspect. Can you expatiate on that and how you intend to make that happen? Yes, we're planning to make some amendments to the law to make it a little more inclusive of so many little gaps here and there. I do not think anyone in his or her right thinking senses should justify rape. I do not think anyone in his or her right senses should blame the victim of rape. And so if we get people blaming victims of rape or justifying it, yes, she deserved it, we will arrest and prosecute you. And I'm sure that we're going to amend that act to capture that. So
basically, if people come on social media, because that is where a lot of these conversations take place.
Pick them up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. But let's also talk about, the reporting line of rape. I know that your agency and the Nigerian Police Force, and as well as the National Human Rights Commission, you're working together on this issue and talking about training and retraining of police officers and people who are like fast respondents when these issues come up. A lot of victims have complained about the kind of reception they get when they go to report it, and that is why they don't report. In fact, I've had somebody calling on my show before and say they went to the police and the police said, go and wear what you wore when, this rape happened. So you have those kind of things, happen when it concerns rape. The issue that's triggered a lot of all those protests, the killing of Uwa. Hazasto was talking about how they went to the police and the police was like, are you the first person that your daughter will be raped? Stop making a fuss. How do we address that? Because it's a system problem in the line of reporting.
I think that going forward, we are not going to experience things like this any longer because the IGP the executive secretary of the National Human Rights Commission, and I had a tripartite press conference, and the IGP is taking this very seriously. Going forward, we are going to be having joint training sessions with all the law enforcement agencies to make them know how to respond to victims of trafficking. So I'm not sure that they are going to experience incidences like this any longer. I would not speak for the police. I would speak for NAPTIP. In NAPTIP, we have very well-trained officers who are very professional in their approach, and I can bet on my life that nobody would come out to say any NAPTIP officer said anything
of that
sort, and it can never happen.
Fantastic. But what about, being able to prosecute rape cases means that there has to be some sort of evidence. So what is the template for somebody who is probably listening to you and saying, okay, so this happened to me, but they went to report and there was really no evidence to pursue the case. How do we preserve evidence and make sure that this case is the light of day?
Unfortunately, we've not been tilted towards forensic evidence per se, but I believe that the evidence of the victim, supported by the medical certificate or medical reports from the hospital, would help at least get conviction. But going forward, we want to be more comprehensive in evidence gathering. We want a situation where evidence such as the DNA of the perpetrator is gathered and saved by the hospital where the case is reported, taken on to a laboratory where they can positively identify a match to the perpetrator. But even if that is not going on now, because we're not going to be bogged down by all these technicalities, otherwise rapists and perpetrators will come up with excuses and get away with impunity. In the interim, the evidence of the victim, backed up with a medical certificate, will suffice to get convictions.
Okay. There are situations where some of this rape incidents happen in families, and people decide to just drop cases because it's happening in their families. So sometimes they are pressured to drop those kind of cases. I mean, does NAPTIP have anything in mind in how to combat this? Because even when you're talking about the violence, whether it is a child being battered and things like that, when it happens within families, people tend to want to bury it.
Yes, and that brings me back to trying to amend the law as well. Anybody who wants to settle the family case will be arrested and prosecuted as an accomplice as well. Because I want to remind Nigerians that the crime of rape is not a crime against the family, it's a crime against the state. And we should respect that fact and treat it as such. So we are going to move. There's a lot of amendments that we're moving to make, and I pray that we get it done as soon as possible, because we need to change the mindsets, the narratives. We need to start making people think differently and to know that the victims are the ones we should be bothered about, and not trying to protect. Who do you protect? Are you protecting the perpetrator, the monsters, or are you protecting the victim? That's a question they should keep asking themselves. How, for example, can a mother whose 7-month-old baby is raped say she has forgiven the perpetrator? She wasn't the one that was raped. So you cannot turn around to say you have forgiven the perpetrator and you want to settle. You cannot do that. So these are the things that we're trying to move against, to ensure that anybody who tries to settle, anybody who knows of something and does not report, will be treated as an accomplice.
I don't know if this is within the purview of NAPTIP, but I'm still going to pose a question anyway. There are some of them that are pressured into not reporting or withdrawing their report because their livelihood depends on it, or where to stay, or how to, some young girls would not come forward to report because they might be thrown out and then there's nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. And so they keep the stories, to themselves. Or some mothers are like, what, there's no way to live after this. This man is the one who is paying for this and paying for that and paying for that. So we'll rather stay. For people like that who probably don't have anything to do, anywhere to go, it's going to be hard to say they should not say they want to drop these cases.
This takes me back to provision of shelters for the care and protection of victims, whether it's the woman or the child. When you have shelters, at least the children are protected there. and they are taken care of. They are given medical support, psychosocial support, they are fed and all of that. And of course, they can be rehabilitated, after rehabilitation empowered. Like for the women who are there, for the period that they are there, they can learn a skill or they can start small businesses. So this is where shelters are very important, because you need to take them away from where the crime is being perpetrated. You do not put women and children in a desperate situation or put them at the mercy of their perpetrator.
So is there some plan going on for that? Do we have shelters?
For us at NAPTIP, we have a shelter, and we work with those that have shelters. But on a bigger scale, we need to invest in very big shelters where we have trained counselors and nurses and doctors who give psychosocial support, and also we have those that will train them in various skills and empower them so that they can go back to be useful to themselves and to the society.
Oh, that is great to hear. We'll get more details about that so that people who need it, can access it. I'm sure they can find it if they get to your website or they call the helplines.
Only those who are rescued by us are kept in our shelters.
Okay.
Yes.
So they have to come reporting line and all of that first before they get to that stage.
Yes, we keep those who are rescued in our shelters, and then we make sure that they are well taken care of before they are reunited back to their families.
Let's talk about the issue of special courts. You mentioned the fact that there should be a special court for rape. Do you really think that is very necessary?
Absolutely.
Will that help?
Absolutely. Courts are congested, too many cases. Cases are dragging for long, 2 years, 3 years.
Yes.
It has a lot of negative consequences on the victims, in the sense that some victims get married and don't want their husbands to know they were once victims of rape, and they don't want to continue giving evidence any longer with the matter. And sometimes when the case drags on for too long, you expose them to the perpetrators, because the perpetrators are roaming around free.
Yes.
And they keep threatening them and their family members. So it's not good for cases like this to be kept on for long. Cases like this should be dealt with by special courts and tried expeditiously and get done with, so you have the perpetrators behind bars. It gives the victims some form of comfort and justice.
So is that underway? Is that being worked on?
I hope so.
Okay, we'll see where that leads to. Let's talk about penalties, because the Senate sat on this issue. One of the things we're talking about is that there are not in there should be stiffer penalties for perpetrators. What do you think about the penalty? Is it a penalty issue? Is that why we have such an upsurge, because the penalties are not stiff enough?
I don't think so. I think the problem is enforcement. We have the penalties between 12 years, 25 years to life. Why can't we go for the maximum, which is life imprisonment? It's there in the law. All we need to do is to enforce it.
So it's not because it's not there. It's just that we've not been
enforcing it. All we need to do is to give the stiffest of penalties, which is life imprisonment.
So where was the talk about that? Oh, we need to, because what's if a penalty is there than life imprisonment? We're not
life imprisonment is there. 25 years is there. 12 years is there. So why not?
Let's talk about.
We can be talking of 25 years, not even 12 years.
Not even 12 years.
Absolutely.
We've heard some people talk about how some people get 6 years, and it's like, why?
Yeah, we got to work. We got a life imprisonment and conviction sometime in March. That was very commendable.
Oh, that's fantastic to know. But let's talk about how long a case can be for. Let's say somebody's listening to you right now and feels, you know what, I went through violence, I went through rape, but it was like 5 years ago, or it was like 10 years ago. Can anything be done about those kind of cases? And the person has to come up to NAPTIP.
There's no statute of limitation. Even if it happened 200 years ago, if you report the case, we can take it from there. Yeah.
Okay, that's fantastic to know. Remember, you can be a part of the conversation. We have in the studio Dame Julie Okah-Donli, and we will be taking comments and questions on the issue of the VAPP Act, on the issue of rape, sexual gender-based violence as well. Let's quickly talk about this also, going back to the case of trafficking and violence. We have a lot of homes, in Nigeria, and that is the truth. It's sad to say, but it's the truth, where you have domestic, servants or children, basically, and most of them go through sexual assaults. Most of them go through a lot of beatings, that happen. And some of those children, the money doesn't come to them. It goes to whoever, it's some sort of trafficking, basically. Well, what is NAPTIP doing about that?
Oh, we've been dealing with a lot of cases like that, child trafficking cases for domestic servitude. We've rescued so many children in our shelters. We have about 39 children in our shelters who were victims of rape by their fathers, by their uncles, victims of child labor, and all of that. Yeah, we're prosecuting cases. We've made so many arrests. It is not okay to hire a child as your house help. It is a crime. It is child trafficking, and if we get to know that, we will definitely arrest and prosecute. Children are meant to go to school. If you're so kind and you want to help a child, you can help the child in the mother's house. You don't need to bring a child to your home to enslave that child. That is evil. And we have a lot of women, who go out and seem so righteous, but they have little children in their homes, children who can't even take care of themselves.
Yes.
And they are the ones you expect to take care of your children, doing all the housework and being treated as slaves, beaten up mercilessly at the slightest provocation. We had a little child whose eye was almost gone. She almost lost one eye. We had to rush her to the hospital, and she carried out 5 hours operation. Oh yes, we have so many cases like that where they've inflicted injury, even death, where so-called house madams in the house have been so brutal to little children as house helps. And please, if you know anyone who has a little child as a house help, Nigerians, please report to NAPTIP. We would make sure that that child is rescued and put where she should be, which is school, and the madam will be put where she's supposed to be.
Prosecuted.
Absolutely.
Basically.
Thank you.
Let's talk about, we're wrapping up now because of time, because I know that you're really busy and you may have to go soon. It does feel like we're gaining some sort of momentum where you're talking about, sexual gender-based violence, rape, and all of that. There are protests. The Senate is talking about it. The President is talking about it. The House of Reps is talking about it. It seems like a big issue. How do we make sure that we do not lose this momentum? What do we do to make sure that this actually stays? Because even after establishing the sex offenders register, we have seen a surge in the issue of rape, reported cases, like I like to say, because it's not like these things have not been happening. How do we make sure that this is tangible enough to start to prevent these cases?
Sustaining awareness. It's not a one-off campaign. People march today and the next day it's over. They need to sustain it. A lot of our youths are internet savvy, they are social media savvy. Go on the social media, keep talking about it. I mean, awareness campaigns must not stop. In schools, everywhere you can think of, you keep talking about it. Let it register. Let people know that this is a serious crime against the state and will not be taken lightly. Let people know that there's help for them. For those of them that are victims, they can report. They know where to go to, what to do, and what to do even if they are not satisfied with the response towards them and things like that. So it's something that should be sustained. The law enforcement agencies such as NAPTIP and the police should be strengthened. We should, collaboration, the NGOs, the CSOs, the media. We need to work together. We need to share information. We need to keep it up. We need to keep up that tempo, and it shouldn't die down. It's something that we must continue to work together until we stamp it out of Nigeria.
Let me see if I can take this call. Oh, Jerry, person's gone. But on WhatsApp, this question is coming from Don. Says, our children are being used as beggarly elements in the streets. How many of those parents have been arrested?
Unfortunately, I think when it comes to taking beggars off the streets, that's the exclusive reserve of the Ministry of Women Affairs. So I cannot say anything about beggars on the streets because that is not my mandate. But one thing I can tell you for sure is that a lot of children on the streets begging are actually trafficked children that are begging for someone else. Going forward, I'll be having a very serious meeting with the Honorable Minister of Women Affairs to see what we can do about these children, because I am very sure these are trafficked children.
And some of them, we've read stories that some of them, money is being paid to people.
Absolutely.
Money that they make, they have to
them.
go and give it to people. It's not really for them to take them off the streets. Thank you so much, Ma, for being a part of the show and for talking to us and giving more light on the stories. Definitely, we will put out the helplines, for NAPTIP, so that if you have issues around you, people who are, being violent to their help, or to children or to women, whoever, or to anybody whatsoever, you can report and actions can be taken against this. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
Before you go, I did see this. You were talking about, preserving when somebody just goes through rape.
Yes.
What do they do immediately first?
You go to the hospital to get that evidence. and you go to report either at NAPTIP if you're in FCT, or you go to the police if you're outside FCT to get a report, and then you take it from there. You need to get yourself treated, because sometimes why I think it should be this way is because sometimes you have the victims bleeding profusely. You're not going to be going to a police to report when you're bleeding. You need to go to the hospital for them to take as much evidence as they can, clean you up, and then you go get a report.
Should they have a bath first before anything?
No. You shouldn't have a bath. You should go in the way you are. You're on this, everything you were wearing at the time it happened, you go with it like that. You don't take off anything, because every single bit of evidence is very important at that time.
Thank you so much, Ma, for coming on the show.